welcome everyone. Today we are doing this webinar to present to you the acoustic telemetry monitoring we've done in the framework of a FISHOWF project. It's a project that united 17 different partners and that encompass acoustic telemetry and some other areas that we may not be able to cover today. But we'll be happy to discuss if you have questions about the rest of the project. Today we will be 5 speakers with myself, Lydie Couturier. We have Mathieu Wallace from Ifremer, Jan Rubens from Bliss, and Laura Ibora and Umberto Beniti from RWE. They will introduce themselves as they go. Today we are together for about an hour. We'll do our best to keep our presentations within 45 minutes and leave 15 minutes question. You have a Q&R button to ask your questions within your, on the tab on top of your browser, which should be here. So don't hesitate to ask questions, and we try to go through them as much as we can at the end of the session. I will start by presenting a little bit of what work we've been doing on acoustic telemetry monitoring within the FISHOWF project. Then Mathieu will present how this tracking effort has been integrated into regional scale infrastructure. And then Jan will zoom out even more to show how it fits within a European monitoring efforts. And then Laura and Umberto will just show you a point of view as offshore wind farm developers, how this type of methodology can address some questions or needs for monitoring they have. And then we will conclude the webinar. So first for me, so as you all know, the implementation of offshore wind farm in the marine environment will bring to the environment a panel of different pressures. Some of them will affect fish. So amongst the pressures we mostly hear about, we have noise emission, electromagnetic fields, habitat modification by introducing new structure into the environment, and in some area, change of use where fishing, for example, will not be the same as it used to be in the area. So here's just an illustration of potential consequences for fish community, as for example, a change in habitat use, aggregation effect around structures, or change modifications in connectivity of fish population. However, our capacity to detect and evaluate all these potential effects and consequences on fish, they do require improved ecological knowledge, which often lacks for many fish species, unfortunately. Today, the monitoring within offshore wind farm is often limited to regulatory fishing surveys, which are really valuable, but they are limited in the way they can help us address questions around the specific impacts. So there's a need for adapted methods to monitor habitat use and movements of fish in particular, because we learn about abundance, we learn about diversity, but often we don't really know at the individual scale, how do fish use this habitat? Is this habitat important or not? And we know that by knowing individuals do stay within the same habitat or come back to that habitat. And also, we need to ensure that the monitoring of offshore wind farm is integrated into large-scale monitoring, because we are talking about mobile species that do not know borders and travel many different areas. So it's in this framework that the FISHOWF project was born. It's a project that ran from 2021 to 2024. The aim of the project was to develop relevant and effective monitoring strategies that enable us to identify and evaluate effects of offshore wind farm on fish, but also large crustaceans. And today we will mostly talk about the acoustic telemetry aspect of this project, but just so you know, we also did a pilot study that used a combined approach of complementary methodology to look at dynamic of fish assemblage within offshore wind farm. But we won't be going into that today, unfortunately, because we don't have the time. So we implemented acoustic telemetry at different spatial scales, which I will go into later on, and we focused our tracking on electrosensitive species that had different mobility strategy. So animals that may stay within an area up to animals that have migratory behaviors. So first of all, what is acoustic telemetry? So it's a pretty traditional tracking methodology to monitor animals in their natural environment. So we have a receiver here, which is a specialized hydrophone that is placed at the monitored site. And they are listening for acoustic tags, which are represented here. These are tags, are transmitters that emits a unique acoustic signal at a set interval. So each tag has its unique coded signal. So each individual has its own tag. And when the tagged animal come within the detection range of the receivers, the receiver records the signal, and so we know which animal was at this site and when. So this is this data we need to recover on receivers to be able to upload the data on our computer and then deploy the receiver back into the water. And here's just to show you what it looks like in reality. So here we have a receiver that's fitted into a mooring system we've been using in France. And here's just to show some example of tagging with internal tagging for mostly sharks and some fish, and external tagging that we use here on the rays, but also on large crustaceans. Within the FISHOWF project, we implemented this methodology at different spatial scale. So from fine scale, where we looked at three-dimensional movements of fish within offshore wind farm structure, local scale, so which is at the scale of an offshore wind farm, and then the regional scale, where we want to look at fish movements and habitat connectivity across offshore wind farm sites, but also between offshore wind farm and habitat that are outside these areas. And within the project, we implemented our study into 4 different fixed bottom offshore wind farms that were at different stages of development, from construction to exploitation. But we also monitored offshore buoys on the Atlantic coast, but also on the Mediterranean coast. These buoys were placed within pilot areas of floating offshore wind farm. And because at the time of the project, we didn't have any floating turbines, we used them as proxies for floating structure within the area. And we'll get into that, but we also integrated regional networks such as FishIntel, networks of receivers, such as FishIntel in the Channel, but also ConnectMed and ResMed in the Mediterranean Sea. So just a few numbers to start with. So FISHOWF officially ended in October 2024. So we had 7 different study sites monitored, lots of fieldworks, lots of receivers deployed. We monitored 12 different species, managed to tag within these 12 species 322 individuals, and we have 2 years of survey within this project with a lot of detection of the animals. And as I mentioned, we mostly monitored the sharks and ray species. So sharks, like from small sharks, Atlantic sharks here, up to more pelagic sharks such as porbigal and blue sharks. Some rays and also some fish, and all have and lobsters, and they all have different mobility strategy. We had different objectives. So some of the fish were monitored because they are pelagic fish that are likely to be aggregating around offshore floating structure. We will not, unfortunately, get into that today because we don't have that much time. But this is another result that we do. So first of all, acoustic telemetry was applied on a fine scale, which means we call it multilateral acoustic telemetry, which the principle is to deployed an array of receivers that are relatively close to each other. So they have a detection range, which is about 300 to 500 meters, but there they are much closer from each other. And so that the detection range overlaps. So when our tagged animal comes within our array, the signal emission is detected by several receivers at the same time. And this enables us to apply trilateration principle, which is a little bit like triangulation. So we can calculate its precise position within the study site. And because our tag emits every 30 to 60 seconds, we are able to calculate a position about every 30 to 60 seconds, and then get a trajectory of this animal when it's within the study area. So for this, we wanted to test whether this methodology is relevant, can be implemented within offshore wind farms. So we ran this pilot study on the Saint-Brieuc offshore wind farm in northern Brittany, where we wanted to test whether we could monitor movements of 2 electrosensitive species along export cables of the offshore wind farm. So here's a sneak peek of the results that were generated by Pierre Labourgade, which did his PhD thesis with us. So here we can see the reconstructed, the recalculated position of one individual when it was within the study area. So these are modeled positions. So you can see each point is a calculated position, and then with time, we get a trajectory of this animal. So here's the export cable in red, sorry. In blue, we have different receivers that were deployed that are about 150 meters apart. And then, as you guessed, the black dots are the position of the underage rays. They are here along the export cable of the Saint-Brieuc offshore wind farm. And from that, we do get trajectories and of the animals, and we can implement a movement model that will help us to identify different states, behavioral states of our animal, depending on how long it took to get from one position to another. So the speed of the swimming speed, or the angle it took between one position and another. And from this, the model will characterize different behavioral states, such as, was the animal locally active, so made like very small little movement within one area, or did it just swam through, so maybe a bit more of a transit behavior where it just swam past. And then within this trajectory, we identify this different type of behavior, and we can like infer on what the animal was probably doing. So for example, locally active will indicate that the animal is probably looking for food or feeding. So the good news with this study, this pilot study, that we show that the methods work and is actually quite relevant to monitor the behavior of animals next to offshore wind farm structures. And hopefully we can continue and we will get this study published soon from Pierre. At a local scale, now we monitored different fixed bottom offshore wind farms with several receivers, which will not go through the result of each wind farm, but just to show you the type of results we got from each area. So here are the key results of our monitoring of the Saint-Nazaire offshore wind farm on the Atlantic coast. So here we've tagged undulate rays and small spotted cat sharks. So on the maps on the right, you get the offshore wind farm with a contour in pink, and the pink dots represent the different turbines. And then we can see yellow squares that show the release location of the different animals with tag, and we can see the like circles of color. So the color corresponds to a different monopile where we deployed our receivers. And the bigger the circle, the more detection we had of individual on that monopile. And here on the graph, the editor animation, we can see the different movements that individuals have been making within the wind farm. So what we got from these results first is that a lot of the animals we tagged were detected again within the offshore wind farm. Some of them up to like a year, even now 2 years after being having been tagged. They did travel a fair bit around the wind farm, so they do occupy the area, but they seem to spend a lot of time within the northern eastern side of the offshore wind farm, which can be explained from the substrate type we have on this area. So here's a map. Just to show you the type of substrate we have there. Red is rock, and then yellow corresponds to sandy gravel area. And this area here, the northern eastern side, is more sandy gravel than rocky bed on the whole the rest of the wind farm, which is not totally surprising to see that our animals spend a lot of time there because they tend to be associated to this type of substrates. But the thing where we can say that the animals did not leave the offshore wind farm area. At a regional scale, so we wanted to know where these animals were going when they weren't within the offshore wind farm. And for that, we integrated a monitoring approach within the regional infrastructure, such as FISHOWF, which Matthew will present just after that, ConnectMed and ResMed in the Mediterranean. And all this work is actually a bit coordinated through the ETN that Jan will present after that. But just so you know, in Europe, all researchers doing acoustic telemetry can participate to this platform, like data platform, where we can share our data. And so we can share our data from our receivers, so we can know where, if one of our animals has been detected on a receiver of another researcher, we can access this detection, and vice versa. If we detect fish from another research project, they know that the fish has been detected within our area. And this has enabled us to detect some very interesting movements. So here's just a sneak peek and an illustration, because Matthew is going to detail this a little bit more. But from our animals that we've tagged within FISHOWF, this is not all the movement we've detected, but we took the coolest one. So we had 4 wiggle sharks we've been tagging in northern Brittany that some moved within the Saint-Brieuc offshore wind farm located here, and some moved to the UK coastline near the Isle of Wight and came back to the actual tagging site. We also had lobsters and starry smoothhound that moved between the 2 offshore wind farms on the Atlantic coast, so the Saint-Nazaire offshore wind farm and the Normandy offshore wind farm. But we also detected animals from other projects, such as the Fish Intel project, for example, where we had tuna coming within the Saint-Brieuc offshore wind farm and sea bass detected in the Saint-Nazaire offshore wind farm. But I'm spoiling a bit Matthew's presentation, sorry. So that's it for a sneak peek into FISHOWF, and then now I will leave the place for Matthew.